listening to the 14th source for all geeky and nerdy news and discussion, which means that you're listening to a podcast.
For all intents and purposes.
I am D. Bethel.
And I'm Andrew Asplund.
And we are your two overeducated, codependent nerd hosts, bringing you things that we like to talk about, but filtered through inquisitive and critical lenses. In the episode for Friday, February? A stupid month. In the episode for Friday, February 11th, 2022. And man, that's my state of mind.
Every time you say February, I always want to Google it and be like, oh, it's some Roman thing, right?
Right.
But I always forget what it is.
Whereas
I remember the days of the week because they're not Roman, right?
Oh, yeah. I hope you remember the days of the week just in general. But you meant the origins of those words.
Like Woden's Day and Tor's Day.
Tor's
Day.
Yeah.
Who doesn't love Tor's Day?
Moon's Day.
Moon's Day. You know.
Sunday. Where did they? I don't know where that came from. Yeah. Welcome to your source of amateur etymology, and we're here to give you words.
Yeah. We're gonna do our best. But I don't know. February. It's a month.
February is certainly a month. And you know what? In like a couple days, we're halfway through it. Holy crap, Andrew. 2022 is here, and it's here to stay. And with that in mind, we are here to stay as we live through February 2022 with yet another Week in Geek episode. So I'm going to be straight with you, dear listeners. I teach for a living, and...
do you really?
I do. I certainly don't podcast for a living. But I teach at the local university, and the way this semester worked out, and this might be how it is wherever you're listening, our semester started at the end of January, and the first 2 weeks continued to be what we've been doing for the last 2 years, teaching online. And we're now back. This week was our first week back in the classroom, which has just dominated all of my attention and anxiety and waking hours. So I am not the best nerd host this week, so I'm going to do my best to contribute to the best of my ability, though.
Well, it's good. It's good. So it's fine because I think it's an interesting week.
Yeah.
Because first of all, without talking too much about it, this week saw the end of Star Wars: The Book of Boba Fett.
Right.
Actually, or is it just called The Book of Boba Fett?
I think it's just called The Book of Boba Fett.
Which is a 7-part TV series about the Star Wars. And I personally just finished playing Final Fantasy V Pixel Remaster, so a re-release of the original Final Fantasy V. Mm-hmm. And I've started playing Bravely Default 2, which I've called the most recent direct progeny of Final Fantasy V in terms of gameplay and aesthetic and feel.
So you're talking jobs, is what I'm hearing.
Yeah, it's just it's a job system. And for those who don't know, Final Fantasy V is where they really, although they introduced jobs in Final Fantasy III,
right.
5 is where the system that is what we know kind of manifested and was implemented in Final Fantasy games, Final Fantasy Tactics Advance. I think Final Fantasy 12 had something kind of like it.
10-2.
10-2 had it. You're right. 10-2 had the dress spheres.
Dress spheres. Yes.
Bravely Default and Octopath Traveler. So it's and of course other games have done things like it too.
Right. I would say like post 7 and excusing 10-2. Final Fantasy systems, like for the main number games, never got as complicated as I guess customizable as what we saw in those NES and not NES and Famicom and Super NES and Super Famicom games.
Right.
Instead, the one thing that I saw, having played 7 through 12, I think, and 15, I guess, was they kind of took the what was the materia system from Final Fantasy 7 and just like made that more complicated. It's basically what the main Final Fantasy series went with in the polygonal era up until Final Fantasy 15 was really in-depth, complicated skill trees. that you just kind of spent experience points to unlock or place items on to unlock, and not actually manipulating the characters that you're playing with beyond like, oh, now they make more XP per hit or something like that, right? Which is a shame or smart depending on how you want to approach your JRPGs, right?
And it's a game, right? And this is, at the end of the day, it all boils down to, why are people playing this? What is the game experience? What's the main game loop, as they say in development?
Right. And I can't cast too much like shade on it because I'm vocal here saying Final Fantasy VI is my favorite Final Fantasy game, which doesn't really allow a lot of like, you can't change jobs and stuff, and you can't really change aesthetics of the characters that you play. But there is customizability in terms of which
characters you choose,
and what kind of magic you want them to focus on and learn, and the boons you get with the Medusae you attach to those characters and stuff like that. But we're not. Final Fantasy VI is later this month.
Later this month. But the reason why I think about it is, 'cause when I started playing Bravely Default 2, I actually sent a text to Dan. And I said, like, wow, it's weird to play this. And it feels very much like this is the game I just finished, but then fast forwarded 20 years, and with all the stuff that you'd add over time, right? Because as you create a game system that works, and over time you complexify it, because that's a thing we do, right? We realize that as you master a system, you want more, right? You want something different. You don't just want to keep turning the same wheel. You want to turn a bigger wheel or a slightly different wheel. This is, with respect to game mechanics, not narrative and story. And I was thinking about that, and it did get me thinking a little bit about, kind of game legacies and just where this game called Final Fantasy that I recognize from the 90s, I now realize that Bravely Default and Octopath Traveler are kind of where I see the things I recognize as Final Fantasy having gone.
Right. Things as your Final Fantasy, quote unquote?
I guess, is my Final Fantasy. Whereas the thing that is actually called Final Fantasy, I look at and I'm like, that doesn't even look like... like, it looks like a game, and I'm not saying it looks bad. It's just like, wow, I would not... If you showed me Final Fantasy 1 through 6, or even 1 through 5, 6 is weird, but we'll say 1 through 6, and then you show me Final... So, for example, 15, which is like, what? Dude bros in a car.
Yep.
I would never, in any world, tell you that those are the same game series.
Right. I thought of Behemoth playing Final Fantasy 15.
Whereas if you show me Bravely Default, I'd be like, oh yeah, that's clearly, that's the same, that's the lineage. And I was also thinking about this as I watched Boba Fett, which has had, without saying, I don't want to, because Dan hasn't watched it, and because it just came out this week, the finale.
I've seen the first episode. It was very fun.
There's a lot of talk about, especially with respect to the character of Boba Fett, in terms of legacy and like, is this character, like, is this what the character was? Is this what a show about this character should be?
Sure.
And it's interesting because it does kind of really, and we've talked about this in the past, like what it means to be the new thing, like the new version of the thing,
right.
What is the new Star Wars supposed to be like? What makes it a Star Wars? Or what makes it, I guess, a Boba Fett? Or what makes it a Final Fantasy? Or
well, actually, they're both. There's actually an interesting parallel there, which is what you might be alluding to, is that we currently exist both in Star Wars and in Final Fantasy. Both those properties kind of have this is actually a loose metaphor, but like kind of like parallel existence. Like with Star Wars, you have the numbered Star Wars, and people love or hate 7 through 9, those episodes,
or 1 through 3,
or 1 through 3. But then we have like the animated series and sort of the closest kin they have, which is like the Mandalorian and Book of Boba Fett to an extent. Again, I'm not quite sure, but it seems to me that those the Disney Plus series are definitely pulling from the who's the it's not Filoni. Yeah, it's Filoni. Okay,
it's Filoni.
It's Filoni.
John Favreau's involved too, but
right. And Robert Rodriguez, right?
Well, he did. He's only doing Boba Fett, I believe.
Okay. Did he not do the Mando?
I don't think
at all. Okay, but that's neither here nor there. the point is, it's like there seems to be tracks for Star Wars fans. You can like one or the other, and there's always people that hate one or the other. Final Fantasy seems to be kind of the same way. Like you said, there's like the main Final Fantasy series that are there to satisfy. I'm guessing the aim is to satisfy younger gamers, to bring in new people to the fold. But they are still making games like Bravely Default, Octopath Traveler, or the upcoming.
Mm-hmm. Although, let's be clear, Octopath Traveler, Bravely Default, and the newest one, Triangle
Strategy. Yes.
That's the same group.
Strategy. Yes.
Like that's all basically one guy's group. So the idea that those all feel very similar in like what I think Final Fantasy is, it's like, because clearly this guy also thinks that.
But they're still published by Square. Like, that's the thing. Like, so they are official in that regard. And so, if anything, the future seems to be pointing to there's going to be something for everybody. But that doesn't stop nerds from saying one is bad and one is good, which is kind of what I worry about. And not from us, because we are smart and thoughtful and considerate and critical consumers of pop culture.
Well, and without getting too like philosophy, because it's not really my bag.
You took a class from my father, sir. You are severely philosophical.
And from his nemesis. Actually, I took 2 from his nemesis, if I recall.
He was a popular teacher.
He was. But it's interesting because there is a certain sense of, with Star Wars, right, I'm going to use that as an example because there's enough Star Wars out there between the animated series, between the movies, the various movies, right? There's 3 trilogies which are all like in their own kind of pocket.
Yeah.
And there's some side stories which have their own loves or hates. Mm-hmm. There's now The Mandalorian season 1 and 2.
Right.
And there's like I'm not gonna pull a Marvel and talk about the ship of Theseus, but there's this idea of what is a Star War, or what is the identity of this nerd thing, and at what point, is something part of that or is it not? Or I mean, they're all part of it, right? It's part of it because it's Star Wars. But like, if you're someone that really, like, say you were a young person that watched Star Wars in the theater, and you're like, I love this movie, and you keep watching it, and it's like, versus maybe someone who watches just the first movie and then watches it later, like watch it or something. There's just, I guess, the thing that you identify as Star Wars. Does that change? Is there even a single thing that unites all Star Wars other than being set in the same universe? But I mean, in terms of like thematic content or narrative structure or types of stories they tell, I could be salty and say, yes, all Star Wars are united in one thing. There are action figures to buy, and it comes up in other, Star Trek as well, or comics, like what is Superman, right? What is a Superman comic? And people, that's hotly contested right now with the issue with Superman, son of
Krypton,
son of
Kal-El.
Whatever, about Jonathan Kent, and like, that's not Superman. Like, but is it? What makes a Superman comic a Superman comic?
Right.
And it is interesting to me, and I realize that this started as a Week in Geek, and I'm like, well, let's drive this bus right into big talk. Because also we have a new Batman movie coming out.
I've heard of it, yeah.
And that's Batman is actually another great one because we have so much Batman now that like people can say like, that's not my Batman.
Right. I mean, first I want to say like DC should have had some cojones and just called it Superman, son of Clark. But I can see that's not a really good title to sell anything to. But can you imagine that? That's not an epic title by any means. Son of Clark. It's like,
no, Son of Lois. That's what they should have fucking called it.
Right?
Oh, that's. There's a really fun side trek there about the Superman and Lois show, where you basically have 2 characters where one is really pushed as the son of Clark and one is the son of Lois.
I see.
But anyway.
That feels biblical for some reason. But yeah, the Batman thing, of course, like actually since Christopher Nolan's run ran out on Batman, I think there's obviously like a big sea change that glommed onto the Nolan Batman because there were so many bad Batman movies leading up to him. And well, not so many actually, like 2, but
well, and I don't want to say bad because was it Batman and Robin?
yeah.
No, either Batman and Robin
Forever.
or Batman Forever.
Forever was first, and then
one
Robin
of the two.
was,
I have a friend who really that's like her favorite Batman.
I hope it's Batman Forever. I can see that. But if it's
Well,
Batman and Robin, is it the Clooney one or Val Kilmer one? Do you know
I don't
that?
know.
Okay.
But because the joke with Batman and Robin is that Joel Schumacher, in his infinite wisdom, like in his mind, he was making like a silly '60s Batman.
Right.
Except in the aesthetic of the gloomy '80s Batman.
Right. Well, that's actually kind of what I was building to. It's like after the Nolan stuff kind of concluded, I remember working in a movie theater when I would forget which one came out. I think it was Batman. It was Batman Begins. I remember. So this is even before the Nolan verse kind of coalesced and became the Batman that people kind of established as the post 2000s definitive edition. But people, like talking to people coming in, I'm like, oh, you're going to go see Batman? And I remember seeing like parents going like, no, that's not my Batman. And what they were talking about was the Adam West Batman. And I think we're kind of seeing that circle come back around. Within the last 10 years, we saw animated series. We saw obviously more serious, maybe more Batman the Animated Series style Batman series, but we also saw stuff like Batman the Brave and the Bold, which was very campy, very goofy, very much like, let's just play with DC characters and see what happens. And I know that show got a huge fan base who are all growing up into their 20s now, right? And so going forward, what is
or
Batman?
The 50s, I guess.
Well, yeah, I mean, the cartoon series. There was
I think I've known some older folks who really got.
Oh, sure. Sure. But I'm saying that what I'm speaking to are the people that's their Batman because that's the first Batman they got introduced to, right? To the point where, after this Batman and however well it does, it'll be interesting to see maybe what they decide to do next, unless they want to make it this the sparkly vampire Batman. Nothing against Robert Pattinson. He's a great actor. He's good at what he does. But let's be clear. Twilight's what he's known for, until Batman comes out, perhaps, and
or that batshit crazy interview from that one magazine,
right? Or he's like, I don't bathe.
I'm sorry,
bathing,
that batshit crazy interview.
There we go. Right? No, it was not sanctioned by DC, but by any means. And you're kind of actually pointing to an interesting point just with DC in general that has been exhibited by the movies that have been made by DC and versus the DCCW shows versus the animated movies and the animated shows, like. Probably more than Marvel, like their characters can swing wildly in terms of tone and audience, because comics are goofy. But
right, and there's probably an interesting thing with respect to comics and Marvel and DC that, and I'm not a comics expert by any stretch, but like it does feel like Batman or Superman or Wonder Woman have a much wider range than like the Marvel characters, which tend to, and maybe it's just the way that they with the exception of like the Ultimates, like they tended to keep them reined into like it's like kind of one narrative. So
sure.
I can imagine if someone says like, I have this crazy idea for Iron Man, like, well, it has to fit within the Iron Man we already have.
Right.
Where if someone says, I have a crazy idea for Superman, they'd be like, all right, go.
I mean, that's because those DC characters are archetypes, right? And they're not driven by their story. And you can say, well, Batman is. Like, well, don't look at the history. Like, they didn't introduce his actual backstory until like 4 issues in. Right, he was just rich. He was rich guy in a bat costume, and especially early in his run, guns. But that's a different story for a different day.
And we're seeing the kind of like the similar thing, like I said, with just, I mean, Boba Fett's actually a great example because Boba Fett is this character in Star Wars that, literally like to call it a cameo is maybe generous, right?
Yeah.
He has 2 lines or 1 line in Empire Strikes Back. And actually, I've seen people argue that even the character that appears in Return of the Jedi is a substantively different character, right? Because he's kind of a Muppet in Return of the Jedi. Like, he literally is the clown that gets rocket packed into the sand asshole except that people are like, oh, this character's so cool, you know. And so when the idea that they make, and of course, there's a lot of novels where he's apparently not super a dipshit cool. that jetpacks into a sand asshole. Mm-hmm. But there is this idea that people say like, well, they got the character wrong, you know?
Oh, really?
Well, and
like, there's no character there, man. Come on,
man. I'm gonna make this is the solid joke of the show. This is a mild spoiler, Dan, but like really, they got Boba Fett right in this series because in episode 4 and 5 he doesn't appear. That's the best way you could get Boba Fett right.
That was well-known information. Don't worry.
So yeah, I mean, but it does raise that question. You know, not raise that question. It's that interesting kind of thing of when people say like this doesn't feel like Star Wars or feel like Boba Fett. What right. I think Boba Fett should be based on my experience, and this is obviously something we see with these big media empire type stuff. You know, mm-hmm. with the Disney stuff, with the comic books. You know, things where characters go on and have multiple hands writing them and creating them, and in some cases portraying them. Right.
Right.
You know, like with Boba Fett, like 17 people have portrayed that character. Although props to Tamura Morrison, because like I seeing him in this show, like I will just say, with the helmet off and just being Tamura Morrison, like. Yeah. Oh, that actually, this character is much more interesting to me right. than he was as some dude with a mask that says, "Oh, I need him alive" or whatever. You know, like.
Was this the guy? Was this the first time he has portrayed? Well, not this time, not this show, but is the Mandalorian the first time he's played Boba Fett on screen? Because he was Jango Fett, right?
He was Jango. Oh no. He ish. He was Jango Fett in so. Boba Fett originally, you know, never had the mask off, but then right. when they made Attack of the Clones, they reveal, mm-hmm. Jango Fett, played by Tamura Morrison, and then his son, who's played by some kid. Some kid, yeah. And then when they later that year, or later a couple years after, when they did the DVD version of Star Wars, the original trilogy, they actually had him voice over Boba Fett.
All right, I mean that's
so. If you were to get a copy of Empire Strikes Back, all those lines of like, "Oh, I need him alive," it's now Tamura Morrison.
He's now New Zealand. Yeah,
which actually I think is
that's fine.
You know, that's fine. And again, some people think that's the worst, including one of the guys that was in the costume for a single scene when they filmed the thing. Whatever, but
honestly, like that was having seen only the first episode of the Book of Boba Fett. The biggest thing I was like, man, Boba's talking a lot. Just because I wasn't used to that from his appearances in the second right. and third movies, right?
And it's a weird choice, but again, it does get to this idea of you know what is this character or what is this franchise? What does this thing mean? And I've had as a Star Trek fan, I've had that same problem. You know, mm-hmm. when Discovery came out, mm-hmm. The first couple episodes, I definitely had a vibe of like, does this feel right? You know, mm-hmm. especially with the Klingons, where it was like. Yeah. Mostly just like it just felt like they didn't get it quite right.
And are they pulling? Was Discovery initially part of the Hota Avram's verse?
No. It was always it was always part of the prime timeline.
The prime timeline. Okay.
But that's that is
the prime line. Why didn't you just call it that?
And especially as we see reboots and recycles and stuff. I mean, this was actually I've had discussions about the J.J. Abrams Star Trek, where I actually think that although it's a different universe and whatever, like they get a lot of that right. Mm-hmm. At least the first movie. Second movie, I punched the crazy chair.
They lost you pretty hard in that second movie, yeah.
But the first movie, actually, my only complaint is actually the character of James T. Kirk, but only because it's now a substantively different character, right? Mm-hmm. Because the idea that he doesn't, instead of being the character we know, he's he has no father and is an asshole, as compared to the original series. Whereas everyone else, I feel like Zachary Quinto and the way it's portrayed, Carl Urban. He's just, I mean, it's just like, wow. There are two Dr. McCoys and one of them is Carl Urban. Right. But that's the thing, is like a lot of these they did a really good job with that. Mm-hmm. Although some people disagree. And it gets back to that idea of what is it in a thing that is the identity of the thing.
Right.
In this book, this fiction, this creative world, what as a consumer triggers you as the thing that makes it that, such that if someone tries to do it again or do it differently, you will say, no, that's not right.
Right. Which I guess brings us back to the point of the conversation originally. How do you like the job system in Bravely Default 2?
Oh man, it is smoking.
And how is it iterative on the Final Fantasy V job system? So the jobs, so like with Final Fantasy V, if I remember correctly, you kind of collect these different jobs, which are basically different aesthetics that also have different innate abilities and stuff like that.
And you get job points, and you level up the job, and you get abilities that you can then use when you're in other jobs. So the big thing is, it was like, oh look, you can be a black mage, but then have the white mage magic ability because you leveled up a white mage previously. So you have your character can do black magic and white magic.
Right.
Or you could be the fighter and have this other thing.
Right.
And it's been a design that they've been working with and tooling with, like I said, in Final Fantasy Tactics.
Right. You level up your character in that job until a certain point, and you can kind of like, okay, now you've unlocked the ability to take that skill to other jobs in addition to the jobs that you take on. Right.
And they've continued to develop what that means of like how you have multiple job skills or whatever. Right. And I mean, like in Bravely Default, Bravely Default came out about, gosh, it was like 6 or 7 years ago on the Nintendo 3DS.
Yeah.
And it was like, when it came out, it was like, oh, this is really cool. Other than the fact that it was, I think it had some weird issues. Probably because it was a mobile game, so it didn't have quite the. I just remember there's a lot of
a mobile platform game. Like it wasn't a phone game.
Right. Yeah. And you get these different job abilities that. And like I said, they develop the way that you mix and match them. So really, by Bravely Default 2, it really is this idea that we've seen the kind of the way they've found to make it even more interesting and gamey. And when I say that, it's the idea that you could just do more like, mix and match stuff, find cool combos. Because actually, if going back to our podcast about the Final Fantasy V boss fight book, they talk about how they realized in the development of that game that what was fun for a lot of people was finding cool combinations of abilities, right? That you could level up the archer and get, basically quad shot. I forget what they call it.
Right.
Rapid fire. And then, use that with the ninja, so you're now suddenly just killing everything, right? And that was a cool combo. And then, if you mix it with this other ability, it then becomes even cooler. And so that is kind of what Bravely Default these games have really gone into, where you have more opportunities to mix and match stuff, to find the cool combinations, and they continue to experiment with what these different abilities do and how you can mix and match them. So yeah, it's fun. I like it. I'm enjoying it. It's obviously not going to do what the first Bravely Default did, which was during the final battle. It activated the 3DS camera.
Right.
Into the battlefield.
Yeah.
I think I was like supporting, because the whole idea was that the player was part of it, right?
Right.
It was just weird because if I recall, I was at work at the bank in the call center. And I'm like, I have a break or whatever. I'm going to do this battle, and here I am, like I'm sitting in my cubicle, and I see my dumb face on my 3DS at work. Like, oof.
And you have to beat yourself? That sounds bad.
No, I don't.
Don't beat yourself at work, Andrew.
No. Yeah. So no, it's. I think that this is, in terms of a game, that it definitely feels like this descendant. This. What if we kept developing the thing that was, for a lot of people, fun in Final Fantasy V and these later games, and just keep developing that and continue to develop that as a game concept. With their aesthetic, right? There's still black mages and white mages. There's still, the other things that you expect to see in kind of a Final Fantasy game.
Sure. but it's not a Final Fantasy game. It's Bravely Default.
It's
right?
not. It's Bravely Default. Yeah.
But so wait, are you saying they have Final Fantasy aesthetics in there, like black mages and like?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's one of the jobs, black mage and white mage are a thing.
But like
they don't look quite the same.
Oh, okay. I was wondering, but yeah, well, that's cool. I'm glad you're enjoying it. You're enjoying it. I can probably sum up my week in geek here real quick because I haven't done anything. Everybody, I'm busy and not. I get we're all busy, and I don't mean to. I'm not insinuating I'm more busy than anybody else, but I'm also just buried under anxiety and fear. But just not legitimate fear because, well, like I said, going back into rooms full of people that I haven't done in almost literally 2 years. So. I've been occupied. But the one thing I will say is that the couple times I've had some downtime, usually because I wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning going like, I can't go back to sleep, I do what I always do to calm myself down, which is to play video games. But I haven't been playing anything new. In fact, one of the things I've been kind of worrying about over the last couple months is just like, I haven't really, like I'm trying to play some games and trying to find something to latch on to. And nothing's really grabbed me. Really, honestly, since Metroid Dread, when that came out last October, and I'm still honestly playing that. It's because it's fun. But so I bought new games and I was going to try that. I picked up Axiom Verge 2. That didn't grab me. I started playing. I've talked about Griftlands on here, and that's fine. But it's not grabbing me. You know, and I decided to just throw in a game that I like. I know I like it, and I've been kind of meaning to play through the series for a while. I threw in the first game in the Batman Arkham series, Batman Arkham Asylum, which was I'm playing the re-released version, the sort of HD-ified version for the PlayStation 4. I think, well, this at least I know I'll have fun because I played this game a bunch already. But then I got into it. I'm like, I want to find all the secrets. I want to like follow the story, and it wasn't until I was kind of halfway through the game when I realized, I see what's going on. I definitely have a type, especially when I'm stressed out. And this isn't a surprise to anybody, especially for fans of the show and especially people that know Andrew and I. Yeah, I realized again I love Metroidvania games because that's when it really hit me. Batman Arkham Asylum especially is just a 3D Metroidvania game. You have this tightly constructed map where you're always going back and forth across different zones, because you get new abilities, you unlock new items that can get you into new areas of previous zones, and you're always kind of expected to keep an eye open for what you can do now that you have this new thing. And that's actually, I would say, more of a Metroid thing than a Metroidvania thing, but it's part of it. And especially coming off of Metroid Dread, I'm like, all right, I see what's going on here. It's just Samus Aran with bad ears and a cape, and I'm okay with that. instead of shooting energy blasts from a cannon on her arm, she's just throwing batarangs, and that's. Honestly, that's all I need, and it's been fun. It's been a lot of fun.
So the question is, does it feel like Batman though?
Well, it depends on which Batman you want to. I think, you know what? I think this game is actually very forward-thinking. Despite coming out in something like 2008, I feel like playing this game, I feel like I'm really getting a Robert Pattinson vibe, and I don't know if it's just me. But anyway, what I'm basically saying is what Batman Arkham Asylum does is show us what's wrong with Star Wars. So if you, dear listeners, have any thoughts about the topics we discussed this week, feel free to leave your thoughts as comments on the page of this episode at forallintents.net.
You can also post your comments or engage in conversations with other listeners on our Facebook page, unless apparently if you're in Europe.
Oh no.
Because apparently that may stop happening. Sorry, there's a whole news story about how Meta/Facebook threatened to withdraw from Europe, and apparently the European Union said go ahead.
Oh wow!
I'm excited to see how this develops.
So they can't access the app anymore.
Well, I think that's the threat. Yeah, no.
Wow.
Because
so you could say that it won't be happening.
All right. Ba-dum-boom.
Well, despite that, you can find us on other social media, such as Twitter, where you can find us at our respective handles, which means you can find Andrew at Profound Dark, and you can find me at dbethel, or you can find us on Instagram, where you can find Andrew at Profound Brick, and me and my work at dbethel Comics.
While you're at our website at forallintents.net, you can also take a look at our YouTube page.
Which could be interesting. I found a function, and especially with the fall of Spotify, that seems to be happening in some shape or form. In theory, I'll get back to you next week, dear listeners. Our podcasting hosting service seems like it might allow us to, when we post a new episode, it might automatically post to YouTube. So if you have been listening to us on Spotify and you want to get away from that, check out YouTube by clicking the link in the top right of our page, and you might be able to listen to our show there. It's very exciting news because because Spotify seems to be a bunch of shit heels. But aside from that, we use 2 tracks of music for our show. One is called Disco Medusae, the other is called District 4, both written and performed by Kevin McLeod of the Clan McLeod, immortal swordsman, graph paper enthusiast, and musician extraordinaire.
You can find his music at incompetech.filmmusic.io, and that's all licensed under the Creative Commons 4.0 by BY or attribution license. I realized I've learned that I think I've been saying it wrong the whole time.
Oh, really?
I believe usually spoken as a Creative Commons 4.0 or Creative Commons Attribution 4.0 license. But anyway, the point is, it is, if you go look it up, you'll figure it out.
If you like the show and like to help us out, the best way to do so would be to subscribe to the show using whichever podcasting service you happen to use, whether it's something like the Apple Podcasts app, or if you're still on Spotify, if that's your main ecosystem, I get it, but our show is still there. I don't support them. If that changes in the future, we'll let you know. But what would help us out even more would be to go to their storefronts and leaving some sort of review, whether a text review or using their proprietary metric will help spread the word to new potential listeners through the magic of algorithms. So, Andrew, what are you doing for the big game this weekend? It's the big game. The big game. You don't say the other word, because that's trademark. The big game. Are you excited for Team 1 or Team 2?
This weekend I have the next session of my Pathfinder game. I think it's going to go really well.
No, Andrew. No, not that big, not that game, not that nerd game. The big game. Like a sport with like sweating and a ball.
And owls.
And owls. Yes.
Superb owls.
Don't say it. We're gonna get sued. No, yeah.
Is that a thing? I don't know.
I heard you can't say. I'll just say it. I'm a rebel. I heard you can't say the Super Bowl on commercial, things unless you actually have that sort of license or something. Who gives a shit? Who gives a shit about football? No, we don't. If your team is in the Super Bowl, good luck. If not, who gives a fuck? Watch movies, play video games, play tabletop games, and be a nerd. So until you don't give a shit about the Super Bowl, dear listeners, I'm D. Bethel.
And I'm Andrew Asplin.
And for all intents and purposes,
that was a podcast. To answer your question, yes, they kind of do replace Weasley.
His name is Wesley. Right.
But line go down. Oh, it'll keep
line
going down. Right?
What's going on here?
No, you're being very loud on the phone. I was just.
Yeah, I'm loud on the phone, Andrew. It's my house.
Okay.
Who do you think you are? Tell me who I can be on the lap. I will get on my Rancor and I will chew on your face.
Okay, go. Go.
Right.
No. Okay.
Is he laughing?
Touchdown!
Okay, but why?
Halftime show!
Why am I touching down?
Because you love ducks.